Hi, Monica.
How's it going? We feel far away. It feels like we should be amongst it, like in the middle of the crowd.
Yeah, come closer.
Yeah.
All right, you made it to Wednesday. Some of you started Sunday or even earlier. It is hot here. Excited to have this chat with Monica.
They told us to go closer. They were like, get that mic really
there we go. Can we
up
hear
there.
Me now?
Yeah.
It's better? Yeah. I sound like a Verizon commercial. All right, so Monica's the CMO of Blizzard Entertainment. So some of you that don't know Blizzard, we're talking about some of the biggest gaming franchises there are. So some of you know, most of you know, World of Warcraft, Diablo, Overwatch, and a lot more. Tell us a little bit about, just for the crowd, on what Blizzard Entertainment is.
Yeah. So Blizzard Entertainment, one of the biggest, gaming studios in the world. We are predominantly a PC gaming platform. Formerly, recently we were acquired by Xbox and Microsoft and part of the Activision Blizzard and King ecosystem. Our big franchises, as you said, World of Warcraft, Diablo, Overwatch, as well as Hearthstone. We have a suite of mobile games. And then we have a back catalog of games like StarCraft, which we kind of bring back and have a lot of fan appeal. So, yeah, that's us.
Gaming is a fascinating area that is somehow simultaneously everybody games. A lot more people than you think. And people think it's kind of, a lot of people think of young male playing Xbox in their basement. And that is just so far from the truth on there. What is gaming? How big is it?
I mean, gaming is the largest entertainment medium in the world. Having come from traditional entertainment, Netflix, Meta, kind of studio world, coming into gaming, I was absolutely blown away by the scale of it. Just for an example, World of Warcraft, we have 500 million players that have, played this game over the last 20 years. And so the scale of it, and I think you're seeing it now, especially with young players, is this is their entertainment. This is what they're choosing to engage with when they have a choice. And so, you're seeing that too with the way that, gaming has really become the new IP. Gaming is a new comic book, Minecraft movie, Fallout, Last of Us. This is really where kind of the richness of storytelling, worlds, lore, characters is coming from. And I think we've only kind of tipped the spear in that for the future. So, if you're not hanging out with gamers and trying to understand it, you're kind of missing the point.
It's so much bigger than most people realize. You've taken the big step or Blizzard has taken the big step to actually in-house. And there's a lot of talk around Cannes about to what extent how big of an undertaking that is. How have you done that? Which parts have you brought in? What challenges have you run into with that?
Do you mean from a media standpoint?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For paid media, you brought a lot of that in-house. Whereas there's a lot of companies that say, great. And then they realize, oh, that's a lot harder than we think. So to make that transition is a challenge that different brands have said they've considered, but there's a lot of value in an agency that you can't be good at everything.
Yeah.
And it's hard to figure out where you can develop expertise appropriately.
Totally. Well, paid media, in-house, out-of-house, it's a pendulum that swings. Over many years, Blizzard had built a really strong growth and performance pipe. It helps. We have our own platform. So we have a Battle.net platform where we bring in most of our players. And so when you have that first-party data and that availability, having a growth engine to go out and activate players and reach new ones and convert them is really powerful. And so naturally, they saw really strong performance-driven ROI and ROAS, and that accelerated a lot of their plans. I would say now we're in the process of kind of rebalancing that pendulum. To your point, you can't be good at everything. And in the speed at which things are advancing, the reality of being able to expand capabilities and buying power, we really need to be working with a lot of other players. So we are going to continue to have an in-house team that's just hyper-focused. I think what happens when you have these, big media buying teams, they think they have to do it all. And that's almost impossible to do out of home, digital, CTV, and all your performance buying. So we're trying to get really hyper-focused on what is an in-house team great at and can drive results. And then what do we need outside partners to be able to do? So we're actually in the middle of looking for, in the middle of an RFP process for an AOR that's going to help layer on top of the great performance marketing that we're doing, and hopefully, create some of those bigger brand moments that then can drive more bottom of the funnel impact.
And have both. Still have stuff in-house and still with the new AOR for that.
Yeah.
So with such a thriving community, the Battle.net community already loves your brand. What's the balance between, when you think of, for example, the paid media side of things, the balance between, all right, we already have a community, now we need them to buy the new thing, download our new game, versus, okay, we got to expand the pie. How do we drive trial? How do we get people more involved? What's the balance there, and how do you go about it, and what's the priority balance of that?
Yeah, well, it's different for every game. So World of Warcraft, Diablo, Overwatch, we come about every go-to-market plan with a bespoke strategy. These games all have different business models. World of Warcraft is a subscription business. You think about it as the gaming of Netflix. You've got multiple games that you can play when you come into Battle.net. We've got Modern, we've got Classic, we've got Hardcore. You can go back to every expansion that we've ever had for one subscription price. And then Diablo is a slightly different model. Overwatch is a free-to-play game. So every strategy is different. Right. For instance, as we think about what does success look like for the next expansion of World of Warcraft, which is Midnight. It's the next part of a 3-part series from the World Soul Saga. Don't worry, there's no quiz after. But what we look at with that one, we have a new feature coming that's housing. Sounds crazy. Imagine the Sims in World of Warcraft. And what we believe that is the most desired, the most requested feature we have ever had for World of Warcraft. And it's finally coming after 20 years. And so we believe the opportunity is that this can create outsized win back with our core players to come back into the game if they've been out for a while. And so that's a heavy part of how we would look at what success is for World of Warcraft for that expansion. At the same time, we believe that this new feature actually allows us to go and talk to women and to some of our underserved players in a way that could attract new. But net new is often, that's the hardest one to kind of go after because it has to be the feature. You have to have the right product market fit to be able to do it. And we think with this one that we do. But it's a balancing act. It's an 80-20 game. 80% is going after who we know can come back and play the game, can come into the game as a new player. And 20% is really about going after some of those new audiences that we've under-indexed in.
When you have something big, you finally have a big launch that you're ready to go. Not everything can be your biggest thing of the year. A lot of companies say, all right, this is our biggest thing. Let's look at over the course of the year or the last 2 years, what has been most effective, and let's lean into that. Other brands say, this is a chance where we have a little bit more budget to play with. Should we lean into what we've already done, or this is a chance to get outside the box? You were mentioning with this new feature, you're using it to reach new audiences that had been a target before, and really excited about some new partnerships. It sounded awesome. You want to tell the crowd a little bit about it, if you could reveal?
I think, if you're always going back to tried and true, you're never going to win. I think we're in a time now when there are no playbooks. Almost as soon as you get a playbook, it's time to probably throw it out and start again. The fact is, in this kind of attention economy, not to use more buzzwords, but, you got to do more. You got to try new things. You got to be able to break out. We're competing with not just games, although there's a tremendous amount to compete with. We're competing with TV, we're competing with film, we're competing with books, we're competing with YouTube. And so we have to go try new things and new ways to connect with our players and make it valuable for them to come into World of Warcraft. And so I think there's things that we know, there's levers we know we want to push on. Performance is a great one, of course, right? We know that works. Creators and influencers have proved to be incredibly valuable in our world. We know that that's a space that we want to do. But there are new things that, as a business we haven't done in a long time. Experiential, activations, bigger out-of-home, ways that really connect to our players as a brand. And those are the things that we're really excited to try over this next campaign.
You mentioned that big activation. What's the role of, where do you find them? So a lot of folks are saying, all right, gaming, YouTube would be a great place. TikTok would be a great place to do those. What's the role of CTV on the big screen as opposed to some of the social channels and YouTube?
I love when my research team is like, here's where your players are. They're watching, the streaming platforms. It's like, no, duh. Everybody's watching the streaming platforms, if they weren't, I'd actually be really worried about our digital native, players. And so I think that, of course we're there. CTV is important. We want to test it. It's getting better from a measurement standpoint. We've had really good early results. But, going back to the basics of what we know about our players is how do they make decisions? So they make decisions based on their friends and family, trusted influencers, media that they consume. And then on the platforms, they go to YouTube, they go to TikTok, they like video content. And so that's one layer of really understanding their behavior and who they are and how they make decisions that we then lean into that guides our strategy. So social influence is the number one for us almost, consistently. And then beyond that, obviously we want to be in those places where we can connect to them, beyond the kind of social platforms.
I feel like one of the cliche terms in our industry is the marketing funnel. It's changing a bit. Apologies to anyone here that disagrees on that. There's still a role there, but it's evolving. When you're trying to convert people, a lot of brands will dive to the bottom of the funnel and do that. And then they find that sometimes they need to climb up to put more in and reach out to new audiences, as you referenced there. Others that have been mostly talking about branding, they'll figure out, all right, but now I need to figure out how everything is performance. At Perion, where we work, when I work with brands, they're often trying to merge those two. And it's a little bit more of a flywheel to figure out how they work together. How are you thinking of those areas for Blizzard, and does that change a lot based on the product line that you work on?
Controversially, I hate funnels. I just think they don't really tell you about the player. At the end of the day, we're marketing to humans. Yeah. We got to connect to humans. And we need to understand who they are and what they care about and why they play our games, right? And what they get out of it. And then let's go and figure out ways to kind of win those hearts and minds and where they are. The more applicable, what I talk about with my team is our North Star is word of mouth. The best thing we can do for our games is drive word of mouth. That means, of course, how we stoke the community conversation, how we stoke the social conversation, but also what is our marketing doing to drive word of mouth and conversation? And honestly, when I was at Instagram, we used to talk about the thumb stopping moment, right? We haven't really veered from that. You need things that are really going to capture attention. And so I think the flywheel, as you said, is probably more applicable to the way that we think about our work, which is the value at the end of the day, the atomic unit for me that I care a lot about is word of mouth. Beyond that, it's how are we getting this flywheel of discussion going, which leads to engagement, which is ultimately going to lead to influence and then people to the bottom of the funnel, if you want to talk about that as like a conversion vehicle.
But isn't word of mouth the hardest part? I mean, how do you cultivate word of mouth? Is there a channel that you could say, great, this is going to activate it? It feels like the most challenging, even though everyone intuitively has known, of course we want everyone talking about it. We want that buzz. How do you create it? Is there a formula that you kind of follow? Dude,
if there was a formula, print it, I'll give it to everybody, you can pay me for it, that would be great. There is no formula, but I think you can get really smart. So the most important team on my organization, one of the most important team, don't tell anyone I said that, is community. Yeah. My community team that knows what the players are talking about. They're in the community with them. They are absolutely know what's, what they hate about the recent patch, what they're frustrated about with monetization, but they're also there to stoke the things that they love and to celebrate all the wins. And we've actually found this really interesting kind of signal that social volume naturally is a proxy for word of mouth, which is a proxy for results, right? We see this kind of continually come through, but the critical nature is sentiment within the word of mouth. If there is neutral sentiment, right, that you're like, yeah, I don't care about this, or this is meaningless, it is not going to translate. Positive and negative equally translate to impact at a game level, whether it's a free-to-play game where we want to bring people in for daily active users, or whether it's, WoW that we want to convert to subscription. And so we think a lot about how are we drawing out the sentiment, right? And getting ahead of building the right sentiment with our players. And so that starts with the community team, and then it filters out, beyond the entire marketing organization.
And the negative sentiment could be used in order to drive, or is that what you just is that where you pull away? Okay, right. They don't love this part. Let's remove that piece, or is there gains to make by leaning into that, because that's going to get them buzzed and talking about it.
I think of sentiment as like surfing. Like think about being on the beach. You're looking out at the waves. Those waves look good and fun. It doesn't matter how many people are in there. You're going to like hop in and like, let's go. If it is really choppy and you see people getting their ass kicked like on a regular basis, you're probably going to sit down. And so our job is to make sure the waves look great, right? That people are having fun. It doesn't mean it's not hard. It doesn't mean it doesn't cost something, but we want to really stoke that fun nature of what you get from playing games. And so how we think about negative sentiment is what we work hand in hand with our dev team. And so we have, through our community network, we will actually bring our players in to do early play tests, to give feedback on the games. And our devs will make shifts based on that, right? Not always, and not always to the exact thing that they want. Sometimes they don't always know exactly what they want, right? We want to bring them surprise and delight and things that are just new and interesting. But when it comes to challenges they're having, in their day-to-day, we want to make sure that that's a much smoother, surf for them to hang out in.
I love that analogy. I want in on all of them, because some of your community is thinking, great challenge, I want in. And some of them are saying, ooh, if it's too challenging, I don't want to touch that. I don't want to try it. And it's so interesting to try and find the balance between, okay, great, I could try it, but it's still going to be challenging enough for the diehards that have
seen. People like that. They're like, oh, that's when I want to go in, 100%.
Like,
yeah.
Oh, that's really flat. I want no part of that. So it's trying to find that balance between them, where it's enticing for one and also enticing for the other.
That's right.
Which is such a huge challenge. And then you could speak to them differently with personalization at these days.
That's right. And I don't conflate, I think, difficulty of a game with negative perception of what's happening, right? So difficulty is sometimes part of the fun, and they can decide how much and hard they want to play. But we want to make sure that when we set up a new feature, a pet, a new class that they're going to be able to play with, that it delivers on the fun or the challenge that they're looking for. And when it doesn't, that's what we're looking for to be able to monitor with our product and our development team.
Let's talk gaming culture, because it's really changed over the last 6, 7. I feel like it's keep evolving, and what it really means or so. How is Blizzard approaching it, and how has it impacted decisions that you're making as a CMO?
This is one of my favorite topics, because I just think I've had the most fun this last year in this role working across the gaming landscape, because gaming culture is culture. You're seeing it now with the impact that influencers are making, creators are making. I mean, the amount of, celebrity inbound artists who want to play because they play the games and they want to be part of that, is really an exciting time to be in this space. And so, as we think about from a marketing lens, our job is no longer, I think, to, break through in this mainstream pop culture space that's almost dead. It used to be you have this breakthrough moments, big temples, and then great, you're going to get that, opening weekend, if you will, or that first week of sales. And now you're thinking about what's the shortest window we can promote this game to capitalize on the conversation. And really, we're less focused on that mainstream pop and much more focused about the actual sub-communities, the subculture that we know is actually driving the influence for the game. They're talking about it. They're the ones that are going to convince their friends to go and play the game, because at the end of the day, gaming is community. Yeah. And there's so much negativity about the gaming space when it comes to, it's screen time and it does X, Y, Z. And of course, there are things you always have to be mindful of. But the best experience for World of Warcraft is a community experience. The amount of people I've run into are like, I've been in a guild for 20 years with my best friends, and these are still my best friends today. People have gotten married, have had children. There was this beautiful documentary on Netflix about someone who had a neurological disease that was degenerative, and he had this incredibly robust life in World of Warcraft that he couldn't have in his real life, and these incredibly meaningful friendships and love when he was bound to a wheelchair and ultimately passed away. So there's so much beauty in that, and there's so much emotion and connection. And so I think that, you know, as other brands want to connect in gaming, it's really important to know and understand those communities and why they're really passionate about the games so that you can step your foot in the right way.
One of the, there's been a couple of buzzwords, buzz phrases. I feel like every year in Cannes, there's a few things that kind of rise up. This year, I feel like some of the words like outcomes or AI or fandom, and fandom is where I want to really lean into here, because there's a lot of companies that have started leaning into the value of developing a real community. And a lot of people conflate influencers with just a community in general. And this is something that Blizzard's been developing for each game for years or so. How are you approaching that piece of it? Because you still use activation on the influencers as well.
Of course. Yeah. No, it's a good point. So we have a community network of 800 players just for World of Warcraft alone that we manage. And yeah, some are kind of like streamers and are on Twitch and certainly, you know, have active businesses around gaming. But we actually just want to build a kind of regular relationship with them, a two-way dialogue, make sure they have the news and information that they want and desire really quickly. And so that team, as I mentioned, is one of the most important ones in my entire marketing organization. And we manage this incredibly thoughtful network. And then, of course, when we have our big activations, when we have our big, next launches, we do, of course, start to then engage with those influencers that might not be core to our community, but then help us reach that broader gaming community. And so we do both. You know, we actually, you know, kind of maintain a really consistent beat of relationships, and then we do, to your point, we layer on those other bigger names and kind of more diverse perspectives, when we get to those bigger moments.
Gaming is, you've been a gamer for a long time personally, but gaming is such a different category than working for Netflix or working for a SaaS platform or what have you. What are the biggest challenges as a CMO, and how are those things different in the different past companies that you've worked with?
I think any CMO's challenge right now is just speed. You know, the landscape is changing. There's so much competition. You're trying to measure it all while you're trying to innovate. Those things rarely coincide very well. And so my job is kind of a couple fronts. You know, I'm in-house, you know, in the executive room. I am the voice of the consumer, if you will, the voice of our player, kind of consistently making sure we're thinking about that. I have a responsibility to uphold the culture of our business and to our players on the internet, if you will, and on our social platforms, and really own the brand and make sure tonally we're getting it right when we connect to World of Warcraft or Diablo or Overwatch. But then my job is to really create a path for my team to do new things. You know, I think so much of our, you know, in big organizations like ours, you're set up in a certain way. You've got sort of the CFO and the finance team. You've got your legal team. You've got all of your kind of cross-functional partners. And my job is to give ultimate air cover so that our team can start to be excited, be inspired, and do new things. And so I think as much as it's, you know, I would say a challenge, I think it's the opportunity, and I'm excited to do it because my team has brilliant ideas that I just want to help them, you know, bring to life.
Now we're in mid-2025. What excites you coming in? We talked about a few different things that's both within Blizzard and then just excited in the industry.
Oh, the industry is hot, you know, start playing games. There's more than ever. You know, the platforms are all changing. Xbox just released and announced a handheld. So there's more ways to play than ever. If you're a parent, your kids are playing. So it's a good opportunity for you to understand them and build relationships. On my side of the house, we have a huge spring. We have 3 launches, one for World of Warcraft, one for Diablo, and one for Overwatch. And we are cranking on making it, you know, the most impactful moment that we have as a business. So I am incredibly excited for World of Warcraft and particularly bring housing to life.
How do you balance, like, making sure you're not using the exact same idea? They're different audiences, but isn't it tempting when you have something that you nailed it for one of yours, but they need to be different because your gaming community is aware of all of them?
Oh, yeah, they totally are. Yeah, you have to. It comes down to knowing the brand and knowing the players. World of Warcraft is a fantasy brand. It should arguably be the #1 fantasy brand in the world. You know, you're in a very different place than when you're slaying demons in hell with Diablo. And so, of course, there are tactics. We've done some really impactful live stream events, but they have to be within the brand that make it, you know, representative of that world.
We're going to finish on predictions for the future from here. We were talking about one earlier.
What were we talking about?
Of future of where you see things going from here.
Where do I see it? Well, if I've heard enough, you know, every conversation has talked about AI, measurement, personalization. I'm probably missing a bunch of buzzwords. I'm excited. I've had an incredible amount of conversations. I think there's motivation to not only do big things, creative swings, but also then to measure them and drive impact. And so I think that, you know, that the future and as tech evolves, you know, we're just going to get more impactful as marketers, and that's really exciting.
Awesome. Thanks very much. That's our time.